that they need no introduction. But of course, in this particular case, this is especially true this evening because we have got our very own Anne Riley talking to us. Although I do have some facts that Anne has sent me by way of introduction, which certainly I didn't know. Some of the rest of you may not have known either, so I'm going to tell you what some of them are. Anne grew up in rural Lancashire, and she always enjoyed natural history from a young age. She went to Nottingham to study pharmacy, and that's where she met Peter. He was doing geography and was in his final year when Anne was in her first. Peter then got a job in Leeds, and that was what brought Anne and Peter to this area. Anne worked at LGI, Pinderfields, Wakefield, and then moved to St James's, where she spent 26 years until she retired, when she was then happily able to pursue her love of natural history full time. She is, of course, in recent years, especially interested in insects, and that interest, she says, started when she got her first digital camera about 20 years ago and realised what an incredible array of small things there are out there to be known better through the lens of the camera. And an interesting fact she mentions in her introductory notes were that her two Bibles in those early years were Dorling Kindersley handbooks, and they were both written by George McGavin. And of course, I think many of you will know that Anne and Peter travelled to Costa Rica with George as a guide, which only served to entrench their love of the natural world, and especially in Anne's case of insects. So I think we are going to have a wonderful treat in store. A lot of you will know, as I do, how fantastic Anne's photographs always are. Her talk is going to be called The Nature of Lockdown in Burley and Wharfedale. It's a very nice pun there. Yeah, I will stop talking because it isn't me you've come to hear, it's Anne. So Anne, over to you.
Right, so I'll share my screen and try to get to the start of this one. Just moved here. There we go. So we've all heard a lot, haven't we, since the lockdown about how people have reconnected with nature. And all I can say is, well, I hope that is true as a species. I hope we have realised that we're just part of nature and not masters of it, and that the natural world isn't just there as a limitless resource to be exploited. Because if we don't realise that, then frankly we're doomed, because the natural world is our support system. And it's certainly been my support system, even more particularly during the period of lockdown. It's meant that I've had to change the way that I interact with the natural world, because clearly we can't go off to South America or wherever. And it's meant that I've had to look at things more carefully, more slowly, make things last, and obviously more locally. So this talk is just a series of images, a photo diary, if you like, of some of the nice things that I've seen in the last, I had thought, 12 months. But when I actually put things together, I realised that 500 plus slides was not going to fit into 45 minutes without incurring Jeff's wrath. So I've decided that I really can only perhaps make it to the end of June. So this is an account of the first 3 or 4 months of lockdown. And it also won't surprise you to learn that about 97% of what I'm going to show you are insects. But then, since insects are the majority of species by far on the planet, and to my mind the most interesting, well, you'll have to excuse me for that. So here's where we are, Burley and Wharfedale, just a mile or two from home, really. And just to give you an idea, for those of you who know Burley, our house is up here, and my walks consisted of a sort of combination of up to the top of Moor Lane, out onto the moor, particularly in April for the Green Hare Street, possibly across, rejoining the road, round to Stead, and back through the fields, and out into Scalebore, or go up the other way, or whatever, but you get the idea. So it really is very local, the area that I'm going to cover. And so house, Stead and the moor. Now, the end of March, beginning of April, our garden is really not showing an awful lot of colour. It's just starting with a few celandines and Himalayan primroses there, but not a lot of colour or nectar. But it's all to come. And always at this time of year, we look at that and I think, good grief, you know, is it ever going to get colourful? And some of the first insects that you notice, of course, are the bumblebees coming out of hibernation. And what they want is nectar sources to feed up. Then they can start collecting pollen and getting a nest going. And Pulmonaria lungwort's a really good plant. Bumblebees love it. And this is a garden bumblebee. Now you can tell it's a garden bumblebee because if you look at the yellow stripes, the second stripe down here, it's divided, it's split across the waist, if you like, a bit above and a bit below. And if you could see its head properly, it's also got a very long face and a long tongue, so it likes these tubular flowers. However, there are several occasions when the weather turns cold again and a bumblebee that's come out of hibernation, you find it's really struggling, so it's looking a bit limp and sorry for itself somewhere. And what I did with this particular bee, which is actually a buff-tailed bumblebee, I put it in a pot and I made up a little bit of sugar and water, no magic formula, no special thing, just a bit of sugar, dissolve it up. And as you can see, the bumblebee was extremely grateful and readily started sucking it up. You might also notice these little mites on here. Now, these mites on bumblebees, oh, I'm just getting a note from the boss, which I don't quite understand. Right. These mites on the bumblebees are just hitching a ride. They are phoretic mites. They're not doing any harm. They just want to go to a bumblebee nest where they will eat scraps of pollen and wax and generally tidy up. And then when that nest is finishing, they'll hitch a ride with a new queen and go and spend the winter and then start all over again. Also coming out of hibernation are things like shield bugs, and this is a slow shield bug or hairy shield bug. Hairy, you can see much better when you see a nymph because it's absolutely covered in hairs. The slow bit's a bit of a mystery because neither the nymphs nor the adults actually feed on slow. They feed on all sorts of other things, but they don't feed on slow. This particular hoverfly is very common, and it is one that does have an English name. It's often called the footballer fly because of the stripy top here. And its Latin name, Helophilus pendulus, actually means dangling marsh lover. And it does hang around ponds, and it has an aquatic larva. And I was delighted to see this insect because we'd only ever seen it before in Suffolk when we had a holiday cottage there, because this, if you look at its legs, it is a hairy-footed flower bee. And so just go back to that. And this is the male. And I thought, oh gosh, we're going to get hairy-footed flower bees because it's spreading up from the south like so many other things. The female looks completely different. She's like a little black bumblebee. However, he stayed around for a couple of days and then disappeared. Now the colours, the colours on the leaves, the colour of the sky, if you remember in April, absolutely fantastic, because there were very few cars, not like now, and no air traffic, and so the atmosphere was clear, and we got these wonderful colours. This is the top of Moor Lane, and the trees are just coming into leaf. And on the moor itself, again, wonderful skies. This bit here I call Green Hair Streak Gully, and I'm going to spend a lot of time in here through April looking out for new green hair streaks, and then looking across the other way, across to Armscliffe Crag and down the gully. The gorse, now of course there is a saying, certainly in Lancashire, when gorse is not in bloom, kissing's not in season. Now, fortunately, I think you can really find some gorse in bloom just about all year round, but in April it is particularly luxuriant, and not many insects form at this time, so I have to look extra carefully. I found on the gorse this really rather cute little weevil, little beetle. It's feeding on the gorse flowers. You can just see a bit of damage there, and here you can perhaps see it's got its nose and its mouth parts are right on the end of that nose, buried in the flower, and it's eating away. But it's actually the larvae that do the damage in the seeds. They feed in the seeds and can weaken the plant, and that they've actually been used as biological control in some countries where gorse is considered a pest. Now you've got a picture of a vertebrate. Now there aren't many of these, so make the most of it. You can't fail to notice, of course, the red grouse at this time of year, because they're noisily flying around all over the place, and they do occasionally land quite obligingly and pose for a photograph. And the males have got this wonderful red eyebrow here. And the second vertebrate, common lizards, I suppose they are common, but I seldom see them other than as a disappearing rustle, and they don't tend to sit out in full view and pose. And this one's giving me a rather accusing stare, you know, because I've just disturbed its sunbathing. And this is what I'm really looking for, because the first green hair streaks, when they first come out, I think are just the most glorious little butterfly. It's such a fabulous colour. And the hair streak, which gives them the name, is this series of dots that goes right the way across on this particular insect. But it varies a lot. It can be a complete line, it can be just on the hind wing, or it can just be a single dot at the bottom. And sometimes, again, on a very fresh specimen, it's not just green, it's got this fabulous blue as well. And it's not a male-female thing, it's just that's just the way some of them are. And it's the hair streaks, the same families as the blues and the coppers, the Lysenidae, and they've got the cutest little stripy legs, stripy antennae, and cute little faces. Like they're really, really nice. And I like this one. They do perch on the bracken a lot, and it was a nice clear background, but there's another interesting looking insect here, which might be a parasitic wasp of some sort, I would guess, looking at those antennae. I was delighted to find this. This is a genuine British dung beetle. Now you think of dung beetles in Africa, the things that roll away the elephant dung. Well, we do have our own in the UK. There are about 50 species, many of them quite small. This is one of the bigger ones. It can be up to 2 centimetres, and this is a male. It's got these 3 horns here. You see the horns, and the males have those, and they're for fighting other males and defending their nests. And they do collect dung, and I wanted to illustrate that, so I found it a bit. I'm not sure that's a sheep dropping or a rabbit dropping. Those are the sort of that's the sort of size that our dung beetles will eat, and it will stock an underground burrow with rabbit droppings for the developing larvae to feed on. So that's a minotaur beetle. It's only the second one that I've ever seen up on the moor. They're not a common species anywhere, and that there's sort of scattered distribution over heathland and moorland. Another speciality of the moor is this: it's not the most glamorous shield bug you've ever seen, but it is quite scarce, and it's the heather shield bug, or heather bug, and it's subtle shades of green and bronze, and its main prey are the heather beetles. Now, gamekeepers don't like heather beetles. Heather beetles can actually cause a lot of damage to the heather, and it's one of the reasons for burning the heather is to get rid of the heather beetles. So I don't think there'll ever be enough heather bugs to sort that out, but that's why they're there. That's where the prey lives. And emperor moth, it's our only, the UK's only member of the silk moth family, and they're just fabulous. And for years I wanted to see my own emperor moth as I walked on the moors, and never did. And then somebody told me about the pheromone lures that you can get from Anglian Lepidoptera for £10 including postage, in fact. And so I sent off for one of these, not really quite understanding what form it was going to take. You get this little rubber bung, and the bung is impregnated with the female pheromone, and you keep it in the freezer, and then on a suitable sort of day in April you take it up to the moor and put it in some porous container. And I used my my mozzie head net. So I put it in the head net, whizzed it round, and really within very short time, 3 or 4 minutes, there were 6 male emperor moths come batting round this bag looking for a female. Now, I did feel a little bit guilty because these males may have flown a mile or more. They can detect the scent from a very great distance, only to find that all they got was a rubber bung. Anyway, it meant that I could actually get a nice picture of a male emperor moth. The females eluded me. What I really wanted, of course, was a mating pair. Now, the most interesting thing, though, wasn't that. Oh, I'll show you the antennae, because this is how the males can detect the female pheromone from such a big distance. They've got these amazing antennae that have got the sort of multi-ribbed, if you like. There are tiny little hairs joining all the bigger sections. And here's one that I actually found on the heather, and you can just make out there all these little crosshairs. And I'd read that these can detect the female pheromone from, some sources said 1 mile, the most extreme was 7 miles, but it's obviously from a long way. Now, I didn't want to keep taking this lure up because it didn't seem fair to the male emperor moths. So the next time I went up was 2 or 3 days later, but I did have the mozzie head net empty. And to my absolute amazement, I had 2 emperor moths came batting around my legs, even though I had no lure with me. All I had were a few molecules left over of the lure. So they obviously are incredibly sensitive. Just along Stead Lane on a bluebell, I found this very nice solitary bee. There are, in the UK, there's something like 240 species of solitary bee, as well as the 25 species of bumblebees. So solitary bees are much more common, and this is one of the more easily recognisable one. This is the ashy mining bee. It's quite a large solitary bee, and they do live on the moor. They burrow into sandy soil, and there may be several nesting close by, but they are not social. Fences have proved a really good hunting ground for insects, and this is just an old fence. And in April, there was sitting this rather nicely coloured 10-spot ladybird, and it's the version of 10-spot ladybird called Decem pustulata rather than punctata. So that's just taken us to the end of April. So we're going to May, and first we'll concentrate on the area up to Stead. I call this the Bull Farm path because it's the path that links Scalebore with what used to be the Bull Farm and is now posh houses. And there's a very nice meadow here, but the path is lined with things like cowsea and later on thistles and good patches of nettles. But it's perhaps because of this as a reservoir, there's a lot of interesting insects to be found along this path. And the blue sky again. And then the path carries on up towards Stead, and along here, the beginning of May. And this insect was one that an awful lot of people commented, and most people negatively don't like them, because these are St. Mark's flies, and you get these swarms of the black flies with the dangly legs. Well, lots of these. They're called St. Mark's flies because they first appear around the 25th of April, which is St. Mark's Day. The males have got the very big eyes for spotting the females, of course. The females look really quite different. They're bigger fly and they've got small eyes. So that's a male St. Mark's fly posing quite nicely on a stook. So carrying on, the trees, the hawthorn trees are coming into blossom. Stead Wood is full of bluebells and wild garlic, but it's a private wood, so I can only look over from the fence, but it was really a splendid sight. And then finally, sort of the end of my route at Dog Kennel Farm. Now, the hawthorn blossom, as I say, it was lovely this year, and it's nice in itself, but also it's very attractive to insects. And one particular group of insects just at this time seem to be quite common, and they're very interesting because they are the dagger flies or the empid flies. Obvious why they're called that, with a long proboscis like that. They are predators, and they have a very interesting method of enticing a female to mate. And here we've got a male empid fly that's caught a St. Mark's fly. And it's not going to eat it itself. What it's going to do is offer it to a female, and while she's busy eating her present, he's going to have his wicked way. And he manages to do all this whilst dangling from a grass stem. And this seems to be the common method, because I saw quite a lot dangling from nettles or on fences or whatever. But this was the best picture I got of them. Now, the thing I want for next year, there's another group of these flies, the balloon flies. They go one stage further. They wrap the present in silk, and you get these like silk balloon parcels with a prey item for the female. The 14-spot ladybird is quite handsome. You're supposed to be able to recognise it because the pattern's a bit like a clown's face. So I turned it the other way up, now you can see that really does look quite like one of those clown's faces. That's the 14-spot ladybird, quite a small ladybird, not that common, but I usually see half a dozen sightings in a year. And another recognisable insect, this is a frog hopper, not the ones that the nymphs make the cuckoo spit. This one, the larvae feed on plant roots, but it's the red and black frog hopper, Cercopis vulnerata, on crosswort. And it's very noticeable, obviously, because of its striking pattern. People do comment. I found this just by the side of the road. It's a moth. It's a footman moth, and the footman group of moths are called that because the way they hold the wings is rather like an old footman's cloak wrapped round. And the red-necked footman, pretty obvious from its red neck, but I thought it was a bit tatty, and I thought, well, if I'm going to show this now, really it could just do with smartening up a little bit. So there you go, you see that. So I just photoshopped it into a smarter coat. And little dramas play themselves out. Nettle patches, apart from the obvious dangers, nettle patches are good places to poke around. And this is a wolf spider, one of the spiders that doesn't use a web. It pounces on its prey with a scorpion fly, and it was really quite an exciting tussle. Another little tiny spider, this is one of the jumping spiders, a zebra spider, and they've got these amazing eyes. So spiders have either 6 or 8 eyes. This group have 8 eyes, but it's the 2 forward pointing ones that they can really sort of focus, and they can tell the distance of the prey quite accurately and jump on it quite accurately. But it's only about 3 millimeters, so it's nothing really to worry about. And another spider, this is a cucumber spider, the green orb weaver, and it is a very strong green, and it got onto an old seed head of cleavers, and I thought it looked quite nice. And then I think it got a bit fed up with me wanting to photograph it, so it looks a bit threatening there. Again, it's only about 4 millimeters. And a red-headed cardinal beetle at the same place at the same time landed on my wrist. And I thought it'd make a nicer picture if I put it on a grass stem. It's a rather smart beetle, I think. Its larvae live under bark and they feed on other insect larvae. And on the moor, the trees are coming into fuller leaf now, and the bracken's starting to appear. And on the bracken, there's another special little bug that I like to see that I discovered a year or two ago. Not many things feed on bracken because it's quite toxic. 1 or 2 micro moths, 1 or 2 things, but not a lot. Certainly mammals, it's poisonous to mammals. And this little bug, it's a bracken specialist, and that's reflected in its name, which is Ditropis pteridis, as in, you know, fern. And I just use this to illustrate the distinguishing features of a bug, and the particular one is the mouth parts, which this rostrum is specially for piercing and sucking. So it's a bug, not a beetle. And there's a male and female. It's not a colour thing that you can get black and white female ones, but the female is much bigger because, of course, she's carrying the eggs. Tiger beetles. It wasn't a good year for tiger beetles, but they are fantastic to see. You see this flash of green as a tiger beetle whizzes past chasing an ant or something. Quite fond of ants. But the really impressive feature of the tiger beetle are its jaws. I mean, it's got these amazing sort of scissors for jaws, and I've seen one mashing up an ant, and they do mash they sort of go from side to side and make a nice mulch. There's a wall that runs along the side of the moor, and there's just one particular spot where a rowan tree and an oak tree grow together. They're a bit distorted, but at this time of year they're fantastic colour, and the 2 colours go together nicely. And on these trees there was a whole swarm of little longhorn moths. These are micro moth, the green longhorn moth, and the males have incredibly long antennae. And when they land, they very briefly hold their hind wings exposed, and it took me ages to get a picture with one that hadn't quite put its wings together. And you can see the hind wings are a very pretty sort of coppery, bronzy colour. The females have shorter antennae. Click beetles are the beetles that can get out of trouble if there's a predator about by basically springing and somersaulting. They've got a peg between the thorax and abdomen, it's an energy store, and they ping and shoot up out of the way. This is a click beetle that's quite common on the moor, and it's a very smart one. And Tony has a Latin name, Tenicera cuprea. Another solitary bee, this is the tawny mining bee that you might get in your garden that makes the volcano mounds of soil. And it's a beautiful, rich, foxy orange colour. So it's quite a big solitary bee, and it's quite recognisable. And it has its nest, I said, in sandy soil, and it leaves a volcano-shaped mound of soil as it excavates it, and there's one excavating a nest. Now, solitary bees have cuckoos, just like bumblebees have cuckoo bees, and the big family of cuckoo bees, of solitary bees, are the nomad bees. Because they don't collect their own pollen, because they lay their eggs in a solitary bee nest and it eats the stores of the solitary bee. They don't need to collect pollen. They don't have the pollen collecting apparatus on the legs. They're not so hairy, but they are very smart, and there's a lot of different species, and some are very specialist on one host, and others are a bit less choosy. Small copper butterfly, good place on the moor because the food plant of the caterpillar are various sorrels and docks, and particularly sheep sorrel, and there's some good patches of sheep sorrel, and here it's just having a sip of nectar from a nice little tormentil. And the garden, meanwhile, is starting to grow up. There's a bit more colour. Aquilegias, columbine, we've got lots of those at the back, and red valerian. The red valerian, all insects seem to just love the red valerian. And at the back, we've got a nice patch behind the garage of cow parsley and wood cranesbill and red campion. So there's lots of natural nectar sources now. And in this back part, I started finding a lot of this particular little bug, which to me is a nice little bug. And this was identified for me as Dicifus stachydis. Now, stachydis suggests woundwort, and it's supposed to live on hedge woundwort. However, in our garden, it much prefers the dusky cranesbill. Plenty of hedge woundwort, and I found the odd one on it, but these really did prefer the dusky cranesbill. They're clearly breeding on it from the numbers. But it's a jungle out there, and here's a wolf spider that's caught one of my nice little Dicifus stachydises. Green lacewings. Green lacewings are lovely insects. We often get them in the moth trap. So I save them Pete saves them for me to photograph, and about 14 species of green lacewing, and their larvae are voracious predators on aphids, and they've got fantastic golden eyes. They're very attractive. But the other thing that I really like to photograph that comes into the moth trap in numbers in May are the cockchafer beetles, because they're just such fun, and they're quite a big beetle. They've got all sorts of folklore names like Dumbledore and Doodlebug, Maybug, cockchafer. And apparently you can tell the males from the females, because if you count the leaves on the end of their antennae, males have 7, females have 6. So it must be something to do with mating. Most features are that the male has the extra lamella in his antennae. And I like the head-on shots, good fun. And here's one about to take off, so you can see its hard outer wing cases. It's just about to lift those. Those are the things, those are the cases that protect its flying wings underneath. It's all set for takeoff. But this one decided to just chill out, and that's my favourite cockchafer picture for 2020. But I'll be doing exactly the same again next year, and collecting them all and just trying to get that perfect pose. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever, when you find cuckoo spit, actually poked around in it to find out what's really hidden inside it. But of course I have, and this is it, and this is the larva of a froghopper, not one of the red and black jobbies, one of the brown ones. And so it's a froghopper nymph, and the cuckoo spit basically is its poo and excess liquid, and it provides a shield, a shelter, and deters predators. And it's a really good thing to show passing children, you know, if I'm on one of my walks and one's allowed to do it, and if you want to show a child something interesting, then that's quite good. Large red damselflies, it wasn't a particularly good year at the pond, but I do like to see them because they're very smart. Woundwort shield bugs, this pretty little shield bug that we've started getting in the past 3 or 4 years, and this is another one that can't read because it doesn't particularly breed on the woundwort. It particularly likes a skullcap that we've got. 2 new bugs that we've only had for the last 2 years, both belonging to the same family of plant bugs, doesn't have an English name. Rhopalus subrufus, but I like this because I like the dandelion as a super dandelion head. and it's a smart bug. And they're obviously doing quite well and going to be with us for some time. And the other one, Coryzus hyoscyae, again, these are ones that I've seen when we've been on holiday in the south in the spring, and didn't imagine that we were going to get them here. But this is the second year now, and they're doing very well as well. Mint moths you've probably seen in your garden because they're a very common little micro moth, and the larvae feed on various herbs, not just mint. I think we've got them on the marjoram, and they've got a very long season. We seem to see them right through from April to, well, certainly September. And that's what they look like when they open the wings. They've got these pretty little yellow spots exposed. And the back garden's also growing up, the white lilac was looking good. Loads of red campion now and Welsh poppies. Rosy garlic, yeah, it's a more an unusual bulb, if you like. It's very, very attractive with this rosy flush. And the bumblebees like it. That's a buff-tailed bumblebee. And you can see here, it's got bulbils, you know, some of the alliums reproduce vegetatively with the little bulbils that break off and make new plants. So it does spread. It is a spreader, but insects like it, so that's okay. This is the one bug that I will actually squash on site because this is a flower bug, and it's a predator of other insects, and it can pierce human flesh, and the prick hurts a bit, but the itchy red lump afterwards is something else. They're really little beggars. So that's the flower bug. And this one I was very pleased to see, not because it's particularly attractive or that it's a good picture, but it has got a wonderful name. It is a very long name. It is Dryophyllochoris flavoquadrimaculatus, which has, I am told, to be sung to the tune of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. There you are, that's the name, because it has flavoquadrimaculatus, got 4 yellow patches. Earwigs, you don't often see them, they're nocturnal, but I think they're quite handsome. And the female earwig shows maternal care. She looks after not just the eggs, she licks them, keeps them free from molds and so on, but also she looks after the young, certainly through the first skin change. So that's an earwig. And spiderlings, these are the fairly newly hatched spiderlings from the garden spider. The female lays eggs in the autumn, looks after the egg sac until she dies, and the young hatch in the spring. And at first they have a communal web, and if you disturb them, they all scatter off, and then you go away and you come back and they've all come back again. And then they go their own separate way after a little while. And there's a group of flies, the picture-winged flies, that lay their eggs in plant material, and the plant forms galls and the larvae develop in the galls. And this is one of them, and this is a female, and they have these long telescopic ovipositors, and it's fun to watch them laying the eggs because so this dagger-like bit comes out of that. That's long enough, it comes out of this, and they inject the eggs into the plant. And again, they've only got Latin names. Angelica, we had a lovely plant of Angelica in the back, and it was a magnet for a couple of weeks. It was a magnet for all sorts of insects. So honeybees loved it, and I got our very own garden ashy mining bee, like the one on the bluebell. And it's years since we've had these in the garden. A very handsome bee. And you can see here, the pollen collecting apparatus here, it's not like a pollen basket like on a honeybee or a bumblebee. It's more like a brush or a broom, and it's called a scopa, and that's Latin for a broom. Now, I do follow George McGavin on Twitter a bit, see what interesting things he's seen, and he put this tweet up in May. It's always a good day when you see a species you've never seen before, and I thought, oh, I like that little fly, that looks really fun. It's only about, looked it up, it's only about 3 or 4 millimeters, but it's an amazing hunched back, so I want to see one of those. Now, I did see one only a week later, but didn't get a good picture, but then a week after that, blow me down, in the garden, there it is, Bicelaria vana. Mayflies are interesting because they have a winged subadult, and this is now a full adult mayfly, and it's just changed out of its last skin. It's had its last molt, and it's got fantastic eyes. Of course, it's all to do with, this is a male, with seeing females. If it's in a swarm, it needs to be able to detect a female flying above. And it's also got very long front legs, and that's for grasping the female. And if you look at the eyes, I've seen these described as risen cupcakes with this dome on top. And it's in two sections, so it can see down with that bit and above with that bit. And that's as big as I dared to blow it up. You can see the individual ommatidia there. And this is the female, so she's quite different. She's got short legs and little eyes. And how am I doing? June. This is the last month I'm going to attempt to do. So Stead and the moor, the meadow's now quite mature, the sky's still blue, and the foxgloves are coming out. And on this little shack here on Stead Lane, it's well known locally that there's a pair of little owls. And I did on several occasions see little owl, which I do like little owls. So that's vertebrate number 3. But on the foxgloves, I always want to take a picture of a bumblebee going into a foxglove to feed. And this is a garden bumblebee, which is just the right shape, just the right long tongue to go into foxglove. Mating pair. Now, I like mating pairs. You know the soldier beetles, the ones that you see on hogweed, the bonking beetles, the red ones, the common ones. Well, it's the same family, but a different species. And I just like the angle on this, because I think that he's saying, well, I should lie back and think of England here. This is a sawfly, a green sawfly. Sawflies related to bees and wasps, but their larvae are often mistaken for, you know, caterpillars of butterflies and moths, but they've got more prolegs. And sawfly larvae can be a pest on various garden plants, like you may well have heard of, you know, Solomon seal sawfly, gooseberry sawfly. This one is the green sawfly. And my favourite bumblebee, the bilberry bumblebee, lives on the moor, quite scarce nationally, but we do have them up here, and it's got this amazing extent of red on its bottom. And after the bilberries finish flowering, it'll come and nectar on other things like bramble. And my little fly again, and this time my little 3mm fly, which was I'm not quite sure how I did manage to get such a big image, is feeding on another fly. So it's a predatory fly, and it's got something. And in the garden in June, it's really overgrown now. I got this wonderful parasitic wasp. Now, Gasteruption jaculator is its name. And when it flies almost upright, which perhaps not surprising with this great long ovipositor. So it's a parasitic wasp. It will lay its eggs in the nest of other of solitary bees, and its larvae will eat the larvae of the solitary bees and also the food stores. And there's another related parasitic wasp in the same genus. There's only 2 in the book, and I got the other one the next day, and this is Gasteruption asectator, the wild carrot wasp. It's a kleptoparasite. And then my lovely little fruit flies, and the feature of this particular one on knapweed, I noticed these swellings, and well, I thought they were its testicles. And the reason I thought that was because I had read that the record size of testicles in the animal kingdom was held by a fruit fly with 10.6% of its body weight. And this is a fruit fly, although a different family. So, my goodness gracious me. However, the truth is stranger than that. That is not in this case. These are pheromone sacs, so it's something to do with mating, and it blows them up, inflates them in the mating ritual. The story is a bit more complicated than that, but that's the general idea, not its testicles. Large skipper, we only saw this one this year. I think it bred in the garden. It's very, very fresh. We do think we've got them breeding in the garden. Borage, a wonderful plant for everything, caught both elephant and small elephant hawk moth, and I thought they looked very nice posed on the borage. And you can't beat an elephant hawk moth for colour. And the small elephant's gone for a feed on the valerian. And I think I better skip that, or Jeff's going to get cross with me, because this is an interesting story about the use of a fecal shield by a beetle larva as a defence. So basically it poos on its back, and that deters predators. And that's the beetle that it turns into, a thistle tortoise beetle. And the larvae of this beetle, the varied carpet beetle, are the ones that eat your carpets. So you're not really going to be very pleased to see those. And then the garden bumblebee, male bumblebees coming out, carder male, whitetail male, bladder campion. Now this is another of those mayflies. It's a female, it was in the moth trap, it was very mangled, but it had its egg ball. And I thought, well, it's not going to manage to fly to get these eggs into the stream. So I carried it across to the stream, and it sort of fluttered in and probably died, but it did manage to release its eggs. And a 4-spotted 2-spot ladybird, and a mating pair of 14 spot ladybirds, and a 7-spot ladybird larva, a harlequin, which didn't have that many of this year, nice little micro moth. Oh dear me, it's 8:20. And this is in the moth trap. This is another ichneumon wasp, and it was thirsty. And a longhorn beetle, and another pair of beetles. What I really want to get over is how much stuff there is just locally that you can find if you just look, and you look carefully. And these little flies appear every year by the pond, little semaphore flies, and you can get them in great numbers, waving the wings, the males waving the wings. Azure damsel flies, we didn't have very many. Very few southern hawkers emerged from the pond. This is an aquatic beetle that ended up in the moth trap, which was a little bit surprising. Another lovely green lacewing, a ruby-tailed wasp on the house wall looking for somebody else's nest to lay in, because it's a cuckoo. A beautiful soldier fly, a mating pair of scuttle flies, Astrantia. I have one last story that I want to tell. That's a little geranium weevil eating my meadow crane's bill. And mullein moths we had eating up all our one plant of mullein, and then moving on to the figwort. And this is the last story. These are red campions full of seed. And one day I noticed that in a seed capsule something didn't look quite right. And so I took a picture, and I took another picture, and another picture, and inside here there's a couple of seeds there, but there's something eating the seeds, and there's something here with seeds grasped at the wrong end. That's not its mouth end, that's its other end, and there are its jaws. And I thought, what on earth can there be living in a campion capsule? And a thought suddenly struck me. I wonder where a campion moth breeds. So I rushed inside and Googled it, and I found the answer, because that is the caterpillar, not very beautiful, of a campion moth. And they live by eating the seeds in the campion, and there's its frass, you know, it's coming out the other end. And when it's eaten all the seed from one, it will migrate to another, and it'll eat those. And then finally it gets so fat it can't even fit in the capsule, and so it hangs over the side, and then it'll pupate, and then after however many weeks, because we get 2 broods, it will emerge as an adult campion moth, and there is an adult campion moth. So that brings me to the end of June, and I'm just going to show about another 4 pictures of what I couldn't get round to, because in July I had another different sort of fruit fly on burdock this time, and they are very interesting because they have threesomes all the time, and that's fun to watch. Aphids being predated by goodness knows what. This is a flower bug nymph that's got its rostrum right into the brain of a poor little aphid that was just trying to have a feed. A wasp chilling out on the ivy berries, and when I ran out of things like that, started looking at the back of oak leaves, and there are these very attractive silk button galls on the back of oak leaves that are caused by one of the many little gall wasps. And then in October, November, I fell in love with springtails, which are not even proper insects. They're very primitive little hexapods, and they kept me going for another little bit of time. And then by December, all the insects pretty much gone, I started looking at lichens and decided they were really very attractive too. And by this time, I think it was all getting to me, so I had this fantasy of a little tree hopper on lichen. So there you go. No more time. I don't think I've been too bad for running over. So I'll stop sharing.
Well, thank you, Anne. We always know we're going to get some great photos, but the encyclopedic knowledge is astonishing as well. Members should be aware there will be a test later of all the names, especially the supercalifragilistic one. No, I'd say the local patch knowledge is great, and a really nice reminder of the quality of light that we had early in the year, even if it was for reasons that we'd rather not see again. Got a few questions, Anne. None too taxing, I don't think. But if people have any more, do please put them in the Q&A ideally, or if you struggle with that, put them in the chat. And if other people want to start photographing insects, what camera would you?
I should have brought it in so I could show what I am using at the moment. It's just a little Olympus Tough compact, small little camera. It's really designed for underwater use. That's how it's marketed, an underwater adventure camera, if you like. But it's very small, it'll fit in my pocket, but it has a very good macro function. I don't know what the current price is, about £400. It's not terribly cheap, but it's certainly not expensive by camera standards. But really what you've got to do is take an awful lot of pictures and be patient. But it does, yeah, it's good results. Yeah. Oh, it's I have been handed.
Yeah, beautiful assistant.
Yeah, so that's it. So small and very portable, and a special ring diffuser round, because the thing with all these insect photos is you need illumination, and you're that close and you block the sun out, so you mostly need to use flash. And this works very well. The reason I have this camera is because George McGavin was using one when we met him in Costa Rica, and so we had a little contest who could take the best pictures, and I had a Panasonic Lumix and an attachment, and at the end I thought, well, yeah, I don't know, there's maybe something to be said for that camera, so I got one.
Well, word is he'll be doing a presentation to us before too long, so we'll compare notes on the quality of any pictures.
Well, he uses a lot of mine anyway, so
very good answer. Now, quite a few birders keep track of how many species they've seen. Do you do that with insects?
No, I don't. No, I'm too busy taking pictures of them. I don't identify all of them by any means, but I have a go at most of them. But when I've decided what its likely ID is, but I'm not sure, then I'll send a picture to George. And if he doesn't know, he'll send it to somebody else. And he sent pictures to a Hungarian professor, somebody in Brazil. So, you know, so I do try to get IDs.
Good. And going back to last spring, we had a really wet winter and then it kind of just stopped and went sunny for months. And there were fewer people around. We would never know whether the weather or the lockdown were the main reasons. Did you see any difference in either abundance or diversity of species on the local patch that you know so well?
No, I think is the short answer. No, you'd have to study it for a lot longer because it varies so much year on year. Like, why were there so few tiger beetles? You know, and the year before I was falling over tiger beetles. No, I don't think you could really draw any conclusions from the one year.
And the last one, unless Helen's got an extra one, but the last one I have isn't so much a question as a mild telling off for you. You showed a wonderful picture of your garden in June, looking absolutely stunning. And I think the word you used was overgrown.
Well, I was trying to sort of put it out. I was trying to preempt somebody saying, my God, you know, that's untidy. I was not. No, I have come round to the view that I like it like that. And so long as the paths are just wide enough for me to get down with my camera, then that is fine. The more colour, the better. And we don't cut the seed heads off. I mean, it's yeah.
I'll let you off.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty wild, Jeffrey. It's pretty wild.
Continue. Helen, unless you have any more questions, I think that's... Oh, there's a couple popped in the Q&A. Just
oh, yes. Just seen that.
So one says, having read in The Guardian that worldwide insects are in decline, are there many entomologists working in the UK?
Many entomologists working in the UK? Well, do you know, I don't really know. No, I don't think there are all that many entomologists. I don't know who would employ them really. I mean, obviously, you know, universities, ecology firms. It's not something you would say, but that'd be a really good career for you in entomology. So I don't know how many people who would call themselves entomologists as opposed to ecologists or zoologists or whatever other ologist. There are one or two well-known ones. No, I don't think it's a profession with a huge membership.
No. Well, as I say, later in this season, we do have George McGavin, one of the noted ones, doing a talk. In 2 weeks' time, we've got Linda Jenkinson from Leeds Swifts talking to us about swifts. And in 4 weeks, we've got a couple of people from BTO about the Big Garden Birdwatch, which will have happened a little bit before that. So that's everything from me, unless, Helen, have you got any bits you want to add?
Well, I'd just like to thank Anne for the most incredible talk. I mean, the aesthetics of some of those images is just incredible. I kept thinking, actually, as I was looking at them, if I were a clothes designer, a fashion designer, there are so many ideas there from the insect world, aren't there? Just the most incredible textures and colours and just astounding stuff.
So many ideas from the insect world about everything, you know.
Well,
about
indeed.
Technological solutions, you know, about design, you name it. You look at the insect world for inspiration from surgical probes, you know, looking at parasitic wasp ovipositors and trying to design a surgical probe that's as accurate as something like a wood wasp, you know. Yes, the insect world can be a source of incredible inspiration, and not just. I mean, there's just so much to learn, you know.
Yes,
endlessly fascinating.
Yes, and of course it passes most of us by, and that's what's so astonishing when when you look close up with the camera, what there is to be seen in that tiny world. Yeah.
And without insects, nothing else would work. I mean, the world would just fall apart. It's not just the pollination, it's all the other ecosystem services that they provide, you know, and all the balance that insects are responsible for. And food of nearly everything depends on insects at the bottom of the food chain, you know. So
Absolutely,
underrated.
absolutely. And Anne, I think you gave us up until June. So you know what's coming next, don't you? We're going to ask you to do July to December in a bit more detail later in the year. I think there would be a lot of enthusiasm for that. So thank you. Absolutely wonderful talk. As Jeff has said, the next talk will be, I think it's the 26th, Jeff, is that right? 26th of January. It's going to be Linda Jenkinson, who's going to be talking us, I think something like a year in the life of a Swift or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, a year in the life of Swifts. So hope to see as many of you as possible back there for what I'm sure will be a really interesting evening. Okay. Jeff, is there more to say?
No, that's all. Thanks ever so much to Anne and Helen, and we hope to see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.